bro, back with another video. In this video, we're gonna be talking about the Scrum framework. First of all, what Scrum is. Scrum is actually an agile framework that lets a Scrum team to actually release pieces of work in small increments. Now, what this actually really means, what is a Scrum team? What are the increments? When these increments are being released, probably you ask a lot of questions. So first of all, let's define what actually is a Scrum team. To be kind of precise, it's not called the Scrum team anymore. It's actually called the Scrum accountabilities. And those accountabilities, we have three of them. We have the product owner, we have the Scrum Master, and we have the developers. Now, each of those accountabilities have their own set of responsibilities that they actually need to have in order for the product goal to be well on top. So how this whole Scrum thing actually first works? Well, since we mentioned that the Scrum is actually part of the Agile framework, which is really different than the waterfall approach, because Agile is all about adapting to changes. Not only that, and it's also having a strong collaboration with your stakeholders. Now, this actually may vary because in some cases, stakeholders would like to get involved within the Scrum. And of course, they are at one part within the sprint review. I will talk about the Scrum events as well. And there are actually some stakeholders who want to be updated every day, which is pretty great thing to have, especially when you have that feedback. And you could actually, not really you, but the product owner can actually adjust the product backlog. A lot of the buzzwords were actually said there. So let's first talk about the delivering the work. And first of all, let's talk about the process. Client has some specific requirements that need to be developed by the Scrum team. The one who is actually gathering the requirements is product owner. So the product owner really needs to understand, first of all, why some of the features are being developed. And once they actually understand that, they are moving these requirements to the product backlog. Now, of course, product backlog is the first Scrum artifact. They're actually out there, and we're going to mention them shortly. The product owner, he gathers the requirements, and after the requirements have been gathered, they go to the product backlog. The thing is, all of these requirements, they need to be prioritized. So they're actually the ones who are doing the prioritization of the work that needs to be done. And from there, what is actually happening, the very first Scrum event comes into the play. There are 4 Scrum events, but sometimes a 5th one may be included. And we actually come to the first one. So if we go to the backlog right here, so you might actually see, so this is what the product owner does. So they are actually, these are the requirements, and all of these requirements are part of the backlog. What is actually happening on the sprint planning? where the whole Scrum team is present. Within the sprint planning, it is going to be decided what, first of all, why some of these items, technically called the user stories, that are being defined by the product owner, that a specific structure. The important thing in there is that it goes to the sprint planning, so it's the question of why, the question of what, so what needs to be done, and the question of how, where developers are the ones who are actually being, who have the main word here, because they're the ones who are technically strong in delivering these tickets in here. So now when we know about the sprint planning, the second event that occurs during the sprint planning, where everything has actually been decided, sprint starts, and everything that has been defined within a sprint, and when it starts, is going to appear right here. Now, what is a sprint? Sprint is actually a time box event where all of the increments have been defined to be completed, and hopefully to be completed. Of course, some of the items may not be completed in there, and those that are not being completed, they're automatically transferred to a new sprint, which is a really, really bad idea, because this is something that creates a scope creep. A scope creep, which is a big enemy of Scrum and Agile in general. So when it comes to the sprint itself, the maximum duration of the sprint is 1 month. But mostly it's defined to be around 2 weeks. It doesn't have its minimum amount of how much it needs to last. You can have a sprint for 2 days, and then you can actually start a new sprint. There's no problem with that. The problem is if you exceed this 1 month period. That's when the problem occurs. The sprint planning, I forgot that part. That part also has its duration, which is 8 hours. It's the most. It has the biggest length of all of these other events out there. All right, so then you have another event, Scrum event, which is called the daily Scrum, daily stand-up. However, both are correct. So this is daily. What actually this means? At the same day, at the same time. It cannot be changed if it was previously agreed upon to. The rule is that within the Scrum, daily stand-up shouldn't be longer than 50. So it shouldn't be longer than that. If it's longer than 15 minutes, what the Scrum Master should do is actually to coach the team on why of having a time box of 15 minutes is actually really important to have. And the truth is, for the developers to have the focus. Now, When I'm saying about the focus, that is one of the values that you have within the Scrum itself. So first of all, is focus. What actually means is that the Scrum team is really focused on finishing all of the work that was planned for the sprint. Then you have the actual commitment. It's actually self-explanatory. There is also courage, and when it comes to courage, it's actually removing that fear of speaking up when it comes to um, the issues that they may actually um, arise during the sprint. Let's go back to the daily Scrum now. So this is really important because the Scrum Master can actually track the progress in here. And how the progress is being tracked? The progress is actually being tracked by um, developers having to answer 3 questions in here. Now, one of the questions that may arise is, does the product owner need to be part of the daily Scrum? The answer is no. They don't have to be, because first of all, they have a lot of work, and the Scrum Master should be the one who is going to lend some help to the product owner. Explained in the simpler way, Scrum Master is actually a leader, but the servant kind of the leader. He actually serves the Scrum team and the organization itself. And someone may ask, because this is a really often question, is the Scrum Master and the project manager the same? Even though some things may overlap, but it's not the same, because the Scrum Master is not managing the people. They're actually the ones who are managing the process, the Scrum process itself. All right, so when it comes to the daily Scrum, back to it, developers developers answer what they were doing yesterday, what they're going to be doing today, and if there's some kind of blockers. Scrum Masters are the ones who are actually being responsible to remove any blockers that are on the developer's way. So they need to do everything that is in their power to remove the blockers. Either is it the access to the documentation, either is it the need for the API keys, or to access to AWS instance. Doesn't really matter. Scrum Master actually is the one who is acting upon that. That is actually pretty great. So, the third one is the sprint review, and this is where the stakeholders are actually there, and the Scrum team, so that means even the product owner, they actually show the work that has been done in the previous sprint. And why the stakeholders being involved here? They're actually being involved because what is important is that's that feedback that the team would receive from the stakeholders, what actually needs to be fixed, and the duration of this event is 4 hours. So after the sprint review, we also have the sprint retrospective. So when it comes to the sprint retrospective, it's really going through what actually went well, what didn't work well, so the team can actually be focused on improving that in the next sprint. There's some kind of suggestions and maybe some questions that can actually be asked. The other thing that is being done in there are some of the action points that are being made by the Scrum Master and what actually needs to be done
in order for the things to be better in the next sprint. The maximum duration of this is 3 hours. Okay. So since we started to talk, we mentioned one artifact right there, and for that one artifact, we mentioned the product backlog, right? So the product backlog is actually this part right here. So just for you to know, within the backlog itself, you can have up to 5,000 issues. That is the limit. That's one thing. What else? What else in there is important to know? This part right here, this is a sprint backlog. And of course, sprints actually can be just, created. And in there, the whole team is planning what is going to be done next. So that is the sprint backlog. Now the question that might be risen actually is, what can actually be changed within the sprint backlog? Who actually can change that? The sprint backlog itself? The answer is, believe it or not, are the developers. They're the ones who can actually do that if the need arises. And that's one thing. The another thing is, what if the really high priority issue comes up first from the stakeholder, then from the product owner, that a high priority feature that needs to be implemented, is that the only one who can actually cancel the current sprint is the product owner himself. Only he can do that. Of course, I'm not saying like they're the messenger from the stakeholders, but yeah, who am I kidding? They are. But they're just translating that to the team, which is okay. That's one thing. And the another thing that might actually is important to mention is that when it comes to the Scrum team, and when it comes to developers, first of all, the Scrum team is actually the cross-functional, and also it's a self-organized team. So if the product owner starts to assign some of the issues to the developers, Scrum Master needs to step in, and they need to remind the product owner on their role and their responsibilities, because they're the ones who are not doing the assignment. The ones who are actually doing the assignment are the developers themselves. So they're actually choosing, they're actually the ones who are picking up the work that needs to be done. They're also the ones who are actually doing the estimation. And when it comes to the estimation techniques, at least in Scrum, the best practice is actually to use the story points. So the story points and the original time estimate are the actual two estimation techniques that exist within the most popular software out there for managing all of this, which is Jira. It already exists in there. And the great thing that can also be added through this, and that can actually help the Scrum Masters to understand how the work is going through the sprints, are of course creating of the reports. So you have the story points as the best practice, original time estimate, which is basically like in days, hours, minutes, whatever. The most important thing to know is that, of course, there are other estimation techniques out there that could be used within the Scrum, such as planning poker, such as T-shirt estimation, such as Fibonacci sequence, and so on. So those are the estimation techniques. Now, of course, the Scrum Master should know about these estimation techniques because some teams may not like the story points, so they need to come with the alternative right there. But the problem arises if the team is actually using another estimation technique. For example, the T-shirt estimation. That kind of an estimation doesn't really exist within the Jira itself, even though if the custom field could be created, but within the reports itself, it's not really that practical. Um, what are the other things to understand? Yeah, first of all, when it comes to the product backlog is never ending. So there's always gonna be something that needs to be worked on. Either it's going to be bug fixes, it's going to be code optimization, either it's going to be the implementation of CI/CD pipelines, either there are going to be new features, and they are going to be new features, either there's going to be UI and the UX redesign, and so on and so forth. So this are actually all the possible example options are there, but the product backlog is a never ending story. Now, there's another thing to understand is the question, like, hey, if the sprint retrospective ends, do we actually need the Scrum Master yet? Of course we do, because new sprint starts like right away. A new sprint starts. There are no pauses or anything like that. It's going sprint by sprint. Of course, depends on the duration itself. Sure, one sprint could be 2 weeks, one sprint could be 1 week, depending on what kind of issues the team is going to be working on. So that is also a possibility. Now, the another thing that might be interesting when it comes to the Scrum team should have 10 members within it, because the aim for the Scrum team is actually to work with the smaller teams. That's why it is important to work with the smaller teams, because daily stand-ups could actually be facilitated in the most easiest way. That's one thing. So then the question is, well, what happens if there are more than 10 members within the within the team itself? Well, usually the team is going to be split into two teams, but those teams are going to have the same product owner. They're not going to be having another dedicated product owner, because that would be a disaster right there. All right, so yeah, those are the most important things when it actually comes to explaining the Scrum and everything else. So there's another explanation of the another buzzword that was out there, which is the increment. What actually is the increment? What's actually the sum up of all of the work that has been completed within a sprint, and even the past sprints. So those are the actual increments out there. And of course, when it comes to the increments, actually the most important thing is that all of the items that were selected to be completed within a specific sprint, yeah, it's important for them to be completed. So what actually that means? That means the increment has been completed. So it's like having a pieces of puzzle, right? So one piece would actually could be like one increment, and so on and so forth, until you have the full picture of all of the puzzle pieces that you have actually collected. Um, so that is another thing that was actually being mentioned. Yeah, what's really important is about having the openness, also having the transparency within the team, because those are the really important things that should be preached on. Um, and Yeah, those are the most important things when it comes to the Scrum framework. And yeah, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.